Well, good afternoon. We're so glad to have you all with us on this reunion weekend, on Carnival weekend. Thank you for joining us for today's Tepper Talk on Can AI Make Teams Smarter? We're delighted to have with us Professor Anita Woolley to share with us today. Let me give us a brief introduction, but let you know that we're recording this session and it will be available for you on the Tepper website after the event is over today. We also want to let you know that you can add your questions to the Q&A box right in your Zoom account there. So glad to have you with us, and we wish we could have you with us on campus, and know that that's what we hope to see happen next year. But for now, we're glad to have you in our virtual classroom here at the Tepper School. I am delighted to be able to introduce to you Professor Anita Williams-Woolley. She is one of our star professors at the Tepper School. She began her academic career at Harvard, where she studied her bachelor's and master's degree in psychology and went on to a PhD in organizational behavior. She joined the Tepper School in 2008 after doing her postdoctoral studies, and teaches MBA and executive education courses on managing people and teams and organizations. And today she'll share some of her latest research on AI and how that works on that. She's an award-winning scholar, and her research has been published in many of the most important magazines in her field. And her research has been funded by the National Science Foundation, the U.S. Army Research Institute, and other organizations. She has been involved in many of the journals and conferences that are going on, and she's a delight to have as a speaker and loved by her students at the Tepper School. So join me today in welcoming Professor Anita Williams-Woolley to share her insights with us today. Anita?
Super. Thank you so much, John. That was such a lovely introduction. I really do appreciate it. So let me just share my screen to make sure you can see my slides. Great. And I just want to join John in saying, so glad to have you here with us online. So wish we could be together in person, and really hopeful that we can do that again next year. But I think all of us are starting to get used to this new world of online interacting, and that actually is very much related to what I want to talk about today. So I think we can all agree that the interconnectedness of the world and the growth in that has been a real opportunity for many of us, but it also has really contributed to the complexity of the problems that we face. Certainly, everything we've gone through in this past year with the COVID pandemic was both made more complicated by the interconnectedness of all of us around the globe, but also potentially enhance the resources we could draw together to find solutions to the pandemic. And so, so both a blessing, but also some complexity. And alongside that, what we have seen in science and in all areas of innovation is a growth in the use of groups and teams and collectives to address these complex problems. And the size of those collectives has grown over time. And so this is just one, graphic showing how this has happened in scientific work in the United States. Over time, what we see is that, the sizes of the groups have grown, and the proportion of the new innovations being produced are coming largely out of these larger collectives. And so what this means is that when we talk about building capability to solve complex problems, it requires a shift in our understanding of what that really involves. Traditionally, we've thought about individual intelligence, individual knowledge and expertise, and how that is foundational to solving problems. And that is still an important component. But now we are increasingly seeing that what we need to develop alongside that is collective intelligence, the ability of a group and larger groups, as it were, to work together to solve problems. And so that is what been the focus of our research over the last 20 years, coming up with ways both to capture collective intelligence in groups and also to understand how we can enhance it. And what we find pretty regularly in our studies is that, when we measure collective intelligence in groups, it really is something that drives the ability of our teams and our organizations to find solutions to difficult problems. And so, alongside individual expertise, building that collective expertise is a really important factor. But it does bring us back to this question, how do we create collective intelligence? If it isn't just about the capabilities and the skills of the members of the group, what is it? And so we've conducted a whole variety of studies to look at that question. Some of our findings have been relatively surprising. So first, we looked to some of the things that we've traditionally thought were foundational to building teams, team building, group satisfaction, cohesion, how motivated people tell us that they are to work in the group. And what we find is actually very little correlation with collective intelligence. These things do not turn out to be quite as important as we might have thought at one time. What we do find is important kind of falls into two big categories, if you will. So I'll mention a few that have to do with the people in the group. So, in addition to skills, there are some other qualities that group members bring that can really enhance the collective intelligence of a group. The first is social intelligence. People who are good at collaborating, who are good at picking up on nonverbal cues or communicating effectively with their group members really enhance the collective intelligence of the groups that they are part of. Another thing about the people has to do with the combination of people. We repeatedly find in a variety of our studies that gender diversity, especially having more women in a group, leads to higher collective intelligence. Cognitive diversity is also important, as well as ethnic diversity. So these are things that show up in a variety of studies carried out in a whole variety of settings. Another category of things that seems to relate and predict collective intelligence in groups are collaboration behaviors. And so over time, we have been generating and refining collaboration process indicators that we can gather behaviorally by taking information from how groups are collaborating in different environments. And so these come in sort of three different flavors. One is use of knowledge and skill. If a group does have available to them expertise, how good are they at using it? How good are they at matching people to the right parts of the problem and really maximizing their use of the knowledge and skill available? That's one process indicator that we have looked at. A second relates to task coordination strategy. How good is the group at sort of figuring out when they should divide things up and when they should come together and really integrate what they're doing? That's a second piece that we find is really important. And a third is effort. Some groups are better at harnessing motivation and effort among members and getting everybody to push in the same direction so that the collective effect is much stronger than other groups. And so we find that's a third important category of behaviors that really relates to the collective intelligence of a group. So over time, we have been looking at these and repeatedly what we find is that these behaviors end up being sometimes twice as strong in predicting a group's collective intelligence than the skills of the members in the group, the individual member skill itself. And so what's exciting about this for folks like us and those of us who are leaders in organizations is that it suggests that there might be things that we can do to enhance collective intelligence. And particularly as we think about technology and AI, it offers a lot of potential opportunities. And so I'm going to just share with you a few preliminary findings from a study that we've done, one study we've done so far, and also mention some things that we're in the process of doing now. But it really does come down to how can we harness the capability of artificial intelligence to enhance collective intelligence. Now, one thing to keep in mind in doing this is the fact that, well, we're taking these technologies, but we're using them to manage humans. And so while some of my collaborators might, especially my computer science collaborators might think, well, you know what, if we know what the behaviors are that enhance collective intelligence, why don't we just completely orchestrate it? You know, we can get people to do exactly what they need to do when they need to do it. And then the group could be, infinitely intelligent? Well, again, we have this problem, which is that humans don't always like to be managed by algorithms. And so there are lots and lots of examples out there of humans disabling, overriding, undercutting the various tools and technologies given to them to their own peril because of this resistance, this aversion, especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships. So coming into this, we realized, okay, we have to take a lighter touch with how we're going to apply these. And especially given that in the history of the research on teams, we know that very small interventions can have big effects. You can give a surgical team a checklist at the beginning of a surgery, and it will have a really large impact on the likelihood that their patient is going to experience post-operative infection or other negative outcomes. You can have a team, engage in a very short conversation as they begin work, and it can really enhance the ability of them to integrate their work and perform really well. And so we also wanted to build on this insight and thinking about how to start with our AI-based interventions. So we drew on existing research on nudges. This is something that was innovated in behavioral economics, this idea that you can structure the choice environment for an individual and sort of get them to make a choice that might be better for them or better for the people around them by drawing on what you know their tendencies will be, such as setting the default option on a decision so that they would actually have to change it in order to do something different than was set up in that particular situation. And so we drew on this idea and thinking about how could we set up the environment for teams so that they engage in the behaviors that we know are characteristic of high collective intelligence. How can we get more teams to kind of go in that direction? So that was the idea here. So we conducted an experiment and we designed a number of digital nudges. So these were all groups interacting online. And we had 4 different nudges to try to enhance groups' engagement and behavior that we know characterizes collective intelligence. And so let me just give you a flavor for what these were. In a few different cases, we had a chatbot facilitator. So as the group was coming together, just like we are now, and starting to collaborate, there was a facilitator that came into the space and would kind of try to launch conversations around things that would push groups in the right direction. So in one case, the chatbot was helping the group think about who knew what and how they could really make good use of the skills of the members on the team, because that, as I mentioned before, is something that really characterizes highly collectively intelligent groups. Another version of this chatbot facilitator instead initiated conversation about coordination strategies. So trying to get the group to think about the best ways to address the different problems that were in front of them. Another version of our intervention was a to-do list. So instead of having a facilitator initiate this at moments in the group's work when it seemed like they were ready to talk about it, instead we had tools appear that would sort of prime group members to think about, okay, who should be doing what and in what order, and how should we, stage the work. And so that was a third type of nudge. And then a fourth type of nudge related to effort. So something, especially when groups are working online, that people worry about is whether or not everybody is pulling their own weight, or are some people doing all of the work and some people are doing none of the work. And so this was intended to make visible to all group members how much everybody was contributing in an effort to try to push those who might be not working as hard to work a little harder, and overall that the group would then do better. So that was our fourth nudge. So I'm going to show you what we learned. So first, the good news, which is that our facilitator bot, who jumped into conversations to get groups to talk about who knew what and how they could use that in their work, was effective. It got groups to make better use of knowledge and skill, and they were more highly collectively intelligent. All right, so one success here. Now, our other chatbot that talked about the task strategy really had no effect, which was interesting to us. The to-do list actually had a slightly negative effect. And what we found was that some groups got preoccupied with sort of making their to-do list, and it actually ended up taking away from their focus on the work itself. So some subtlety there around how we could deploy that to try to actually enhance strategy without becoming a distraction. The final nudge, the effort nudge, actually really backfired. What we found was that the people who were working hard got mad sometimes, and they maybe didn't work as hard anymore. The people who weren't working as hard felt criticized. In fact, we asked after the fact how people responded, and some people said, "Well, I really didn't like it much. It just put pressure on me." This was the emphasis that they put in their response, and so. Really, something we thought would be sort of subtle, not subtle in this context, and ended up having a negative effect. And so taken together, I mean, this is just one initial study, and we have some others ongoing, but I think it illustrates the ways that we see AI playing a role at a variety of levels as we try to enhance the collective intelligence of groups. Certainly, we know of many examples already. Many of us already have technologies that help individual members with their own, cognitive abilities, helping them remember to do things, helping them to do calculations more effectively, helping them to keep track of their appointments, et cetera. So that is what we're calling assistive AI. Here, though, we're getting into coach AI. When can these nudges intervene in the right ways at the right times to enhance the ways that we coordinate with each other? That's where we see some opportunity. And then other opportunity, even in sort of diagnostic AI, monitoring these systems using some of the behavioral indicators that we've identified in our research to kind of give an alert that, okay, maybe things are not working as well as they could, so that maybe a human coach or a leader would get involved. And so these are some of the other opportunities and pathways that we're exploring in our research and hope to continue to develop as we go forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I hope that this gives you a flavor for some of the things that we're doing here, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, Anita. Thank you very much. That was a great overview, I know, of a very complex area of research for you. The first question is, how do you measure that a group is doing better than another? And how do you measure the factors that are statistically significant to drive the performance of a group?
Yeah, that's that can happen in a variety of ways. But so to start, how one group is performing better than another, there are a few different ways that we have come at it. A lot of our research has drawn on a measure of collective intelligence that we have developed over, the past 10 or so years that we've been working specifically in that area. And it's essentially like an intelligence test, but for groups. The groups work on a variety of problems together, and how they perform on those problems represents, their capability to work together. And then in some of our studies, we find that that is predictive of how they then perform in whatever environment they're working in. We've looked at it in software programming teams, we've looked at it in military teams, we've looked at it in consulting teams, et cetera. And so that's one way that we capture group performance and capability. So the collective intelligence is really capturing their ability to work together. And then that predicts, particular performance in a particular environment. And then we are then trying to capture measures of other things that we think are predictive of collective intelligence. And depending on where we're doing our study, we can capture that in different ways. If we're doing it using the platform that we've developed and doing our own experiment, then we can capture all kinds of things about the people as they're working together in that environment. We do, however, also do some studies with organizations where we work with them to identify indicators we might get from their information systems, their email communications and emailing patterns and things of that sort that would conceptually capture the same variables that I was mentioning and others that we look at as well. So that is often part of the art of doing this research in a variety of settings is finding ways that we can capture measures of the things that we think will be important.
Great. Well, there's a lot of questions coming in here. So let's go back to AI here first, and do AI collaborative group facilitate novel innovations or slow it? She's a patent attorney and asking a question about that.
Okay, well, I might need to understand that question a little bit more. So does the use of AI enhance or slow innovations? Is that the essence of the as you get it? Well, I mean, I could imagine conditions under which it could do either. However, so when we say AI, obviously that means a lot of things, right? In terms of, at what level is AI involved? Is artificial intelligence helping the individuals? Is artificial intelligence helping the coordination of the group? Mm-hmm. I mean, my general sense is if it's being deployed effectively, it should be helpful. I'm trying to think of conditions under which it might slow innovation, but perhaps I'm not quite understanding the ways that might be.
Yeah, that sounds fair. Have you experienced that working from home, has that affected collaboration and collective intelligence? Have you been looking at the research on that, and or are we all going to be going back into the office to improve them?
Actually, I have been very pleased. So for a long time, quite some time ago, early on in our studies on collective intelligence, we did do some research where we compared the collective intelligence of groups that were working face-to-face versus online, and we found that there was no difference in terms of how collectively intelligent a group could be, and also the things that enhanced collective intelligence. So the things I was talking about earlier with social intelligence and diversity were just as important online as face-to-face. And so I was really pleased to see that, while everybody was very panicked at the beginning of the pandemic about all of this online work starting up, that many companies were pleasantly surprised by the fact that it was not as difficult, and maybe people were even more productive in that situation than they thought. And and so I was glad that they were able to sort of experience that, because that was something those of us who do research in this have known was possible. The thing, and going back to, and that's been true in my own collaboration as well. I've actually been collaborating online with people for years, because most of the people I do research with are not at the same university. So that is something that has been common and continues. I think as organizations figure out what they're going to do as it's possible for people to go back, it'll be important to really carefully consider the advantages of bringing people back versus not. And actually, what we know from the research is that the worst situation is what we will call a hybrid situation, where some are together and some are not, in terms of communication and collaboration. And so whenever I'm asked about it, I always caution organizations to really try to avoid that situation.
Okay. Well, Jack has got a question here live where he's at Docs today. The use of AI in this coaching example seems like something a human coach could do. Is the research trying to get more AI involved in group intelligence because it's better than human coaches, or cheaper than human coaches, or just another approach to it?
Well, I think that's a great point. And so we were starting with examples of things that we knew should enhance collective intelligence. Really, one of the visions, though, is that eventually we'll get to the point where, coming into an environment like this to collaborate, you could have an AI-based coach that just knows a lot of information about each person as they're coming in, either based on behavior observed in the past, or even as they're approaching this situation, and they actually orchestrate the situation with that information in mind. Because what we would know about an AI coach is that it could sort of observe a much broader variety of different variables, and sort of, make its own calculations about what that means for how the group would be best facilitated. And chances are, though, over time, what we'll end up seeing is that maybe that what's going to work best is for that coach to supply input potentially to a human coach who combines it with his or her own judgment to decide, what the best course of action might be. But what we're working toward is a coach that would be taking in a much broader variety of inputs, data, variables, et cetera, to make a judgment about when, how to intervene to best effect.
Okay, very good. Another question was, and how sustainable are the behavioral changes in experiment number 1? It seems like people responded to the skills nudges, but are those response levels maintained over time? So would that continue in a long-term study?
So what we saw in that experiment was that groups continued to engage in some of those behaviors even unprompted later. And that's consistent with other research with human coach interventions where you can set norms and a group structure that sort of supports ongoing behavior. How long? I mean, that's another study, right? That would be great to do, is to really look at, can these norm setting kinds of interventions be sustained even, outside of that environment, certainly without the coach? I mean, I think that's a great question. And that we don't know for sure. Just within the context of the study, it seemed to have an effect. Mm-hmm.
There was a question about that Dave Kelly from Engineering 1973 and founder of the design firm IDEO provided the concept of design thinking, which was centered around cognitive diversity to solve problems. Have you explored how that approach was implemented and how it might guide in applications of AI to CI?
Well, I think so. First of all, I mean, everything that we find in our research is completely consistent with many of the things that have been advocated in design thinking. So we do find a benefit to cognitive diversity. We do, however, find that groups that are very highly cognitively diverse sometimes struggle. And that's where we see some opportunities potentially for AI, because what we find in some of our studies is that these very highly cognitively diverse groups can have a harder time figuring out how to work together. And so you could imagine, a human coach who knew that and was experienced could make an intervention. An AI-based coach who picks up on that based on a variety of cues could also intervene to try to help almost translate different ways of thinking about a problem to get a group to more easily get on the same page, if you will, because there are some, very highly mathematically oriented, spatially oriented individuals who will represent a problem in a completely different way than individuals who are very artistic or who are very verbal, for example.
Well, that's a great segue into talking about the cross-campus collaboration that goes on at Carnegie Mellon. And tell us a little bit about your work and the other teams that you're working with. I know you're also researching on the future of work and what it would be like and all that as well.
Yeah, no, CMU has been really super for doing the kind of work that I really enjoy doing. So I collaborate with a variety of people in computer science, looking at things like how nonverbal synchrony is important for collective intelligence, even in groups working together online. And so we've used some of the software that has been innovated here at CMU to read nonverbal expressions in the face, or to look at qualities of voice. Prosodic synchrony is a quality of voice that you can examine. And, we have come up with some things that really it shows that these versions of synchrony are just as important in groups collaborating online as face-to-face. Yes, we're definitely also involved in some of the future of work efforts that are coming out of the Heinz School. Again, looking at how can we develop relationships and maintain the fabric of organizations, even if we are continuing in this remote work environment. So it's really exciting to be in this environment where there's so many different opportunities to work across these boundaries. And so there's, it's led to a lot of really fun projects.
Great. Well, one last AI question. I know we've got to come to the close of our time now, but where is the AI artificial intelligence in your experiments? Are the nudges improving over time, like machine learning, where they're learning and improving as they go along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say in the study I shared with you, this isn't as sophisticated as some of the work that we have going on right now. But the idea with the nudges is that the coaches pick up on when the team could use this kind of help, right? Based on what they're talking about, but also information about what the team is doing. So, for example, if I know that somebody is really good at solving a certain kind of problem, but the team doesn't really seem to be utilizing that expertise, that's when this nudge can jump in and say, hey, I wonder if, anybody else has some expertise in XYZ, to get the group sort of thinking about if they really are allocating work in the way that is going to best enhance their overall outcomes. So it was responding to what was happening in the group, taking in a variety of pieces of information about what the group was doing at the time.
Well, Anita, thank you so much for your time. I know we can't answer all the questions that came in today, and some are more technical than others, but they do see your email address up on the screen. So if they want to reach out to you, and we will have the video available for anyone at CMU, certainly to take advantage of and listen to again and connect with the great research going on at Carnegie Mellon University and at the Tepper School. And thank you, Anita, for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon. And to all our alumni, hope to see you at another event at 3:45, I should say. We have our alumni entrepreneurship panel. So if you want to join Dave Mawhinney and our panel of alumni entrepreneurs, we invite you to join us then. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful carnival, and a wonderful reunion weekend. Thank you so much.